Hi there. So, in the world of search, there is but one ruler, Google. And back in the late 2000s, I think it could be argued that Nintendo was reigning over gaming, what with the extreme success the Wii was enjoying. But you may not know that the two companies actually partnered up to develop this weird game called And-Kensaku, which means and search. It was a game all about Googling. Players would guess which search term was more popular, build up a staircase using the number of hits from a search term, and even pass a bomb between players, which would explode if they didn't have enough search results. Yeah, this game was pretty strange. But stranger still is the story of how it came to be. So, let us journey through And-Kensaku's development history. It was early 2007, and developer Kentaro Soya from development studio Shift was walking down the street one night when, out of nowhere, he was struck by an idea. He imagined a real-time strategy game with a large search box at the bottom of the screen. The player would type a word into the box, and a fighter would be created, who attacked enemies based on the number of results the search term returned. When he told this idea to his boss the next day, his boss responded, "The search hit part is interesting, but the rest isn't so much." Then he made a suggestion. "It might be interesting if you make it like bingo." And so, Soya and his programmer colleague Yoichi Yui started putting together a bingo-based search prototype. And after 4 months of work, they finished up what they called Panel 9. There was a 3x3 grid featuring a variety of keywords, and players had to combine one of these words with one from their personal word bank. The game would then perform an AND search with these two words, and if the number of search results was high enough, the space on the grid would be claimed by that player. To win, players needed to get a full line, just like real bingo. Now, after trying out this prototype internally at Shift, it was immediately clear just how fun this was to play, so the studio decided to pitch the project to Nintendo. When producer Kentaro Nishimura saw this proposal, he was instantly drawn to the project and decided to accept the proposal. When Nintendo president Satoru Iwata heard of the project, he suggested, "We should probably ask for Google's advice." However, he had no idea if Google would actually be interested in this weird game concept. Nevertheless, Iwata met with Kan from Google, who was in charge of partnerships with other companies. When Iwata told him about their search game idea, Kan was at a loss. In his words, "It was completely different compared with the other partnership work I handle day in and day out." If Kan was to accept this partnership, he would face two problems. Firstly, it had nothing to do with his main work, so some people at Google wouldn't be keen for the engineers to spend their time on the project. Secondly, the game needed an accurate number of search results. That sounds easy, but Google weren't focused on the number of search results. What they cared about was the quality of search results. Luckily for Nintendo, many of the employees at Google Japan were big fans of the Wii, so they resolved to overcome any problems they might face. And so, Google accepted Nintendo's proposal. With that decided, it was time for Shift to start fleshing out their prototype into a full game. First off, they decided to add in some sort of mascot character, taking the form of a cube-headed robot. Since their prototype was based around AND searches with multiple words with a space separating them, they named the robot And-Kensaku, which is a play on the Japanese for AND search. Now, around this time, Nishimura, Shift's producer at Nintendo, came to the team with a concern he had. Their prototype had been great fun in a multiplayer setting, but would it be any good as a single-player game? He told Shift, "We'd like you to add about 10 more modes." 10 more modes! Over the summer, the developers focused on coming up with as many different ideas as possible. However, at first they didn't have much luck. Since all the modes were based around actual data from Google, the numbers they had to use varied massively. That made it difficult to create carefully honed experiences. Too much was out of the hands of the developers. And from there, things only got worse. While testing the bingo game, Panel 9, a problem began to emerge. Since the search terms were randomly chosen, sometimes you get a logical combination, like car and driving, but sometimes you get something that didn't make any sense, like car and swimming. When testers tried out the game, they responded, "It's like playing the lottery, you have to leave it all up to luck." Oh dear, that's not what the team wanted to hear. How could they make sure that all the word combinations made sense together? Their solution was to go through all 4,000 words and manually sort them into groups. They had 30 to 40 staff members going through the list and grouping the words. But still, this didn't feel right. It was too subjective. What one staff member thought paired well with a certain word might seem totally wrong to a different staff member. Luckily, it was at that time that the team stumbled upon a programmer who specialised in Japanese language processing. He wrote a program that would look at how likely certain words were to be searched together and put them into groups based on that. This snazzy little algorithm allowed the team to add another 6,000 words into the game, totaling 10,000. Phew, now development was going smoothly again. There's no way another, even worse problem could be right around the corner, right? Their game was postponed indefinitely. Okay, let's back up a second. So, Nishimura had been talking with Iwata about potential titles for the game, but no matter what he suggested, Iwata turned them all down. None of them seemed attention-grabbing or exciting enough. According to Iwata, in my tenure as CEO, no other game has had its name rejected so many times. As he and Nishimura were going back and forth, they started to think that perhaps the reason why they couldn't come up with a good title was that the game itself wasn't very easy to understand. Despite all the new modes, Nishimura was still hearing feedback that the single player wasn't much fun, and many people didn't really understand the idea of and searches. Nishimura and Iwata asked themselves, is it really okay for us to put this game out as it is? And so, it was decided that development would be put on hold. When Shift were told this, they were shocked. It was like the rug had been pulled out from underneath them. Not to be beaten, the developers started thinking up ways to make the game more understandable. The first idea they came up with was swapping out and search with phrase search. You see, with and search, if you searched for Queen Elizabeth on Google, it would return any pages with either Queen or Elizabeth in them. You'd be bombarded with results about the 70s band and my gran. However, with phrase search, you'd only get results with both of those words, in this case, Her Majesty the Queen. The team thought that phrase search would be simpler to understand for players, especially those who hadn't really used Google before. But switching over would require a lot of major changes. For example, they had a game mode called Which is Higher, which presented the player with two search terms and they had to guess which one returned more results. However, if they were using phrase search, they would have to find a way to come up with a variety of interesting questions featuring phrases. Eventually, they decided to write all the questions manually. Shift hired a bunch of TV quiz show question writers and only used questions involving puns, double meanings, regional differences, in essence, unexpected or interesting questions. Now, it was around this time that Nishimura was yet again trying to get a title approved for the game. Eventually, he stumbled upon the idea of naming the game after the robot character, And-Kensaku, and Iwata approved this name. Without hesitation, Nishimura phoned up Shift to tell them the good news. Hearing cheering from the other end of the line, he knew that they had taken the news well. And so, on the 29th of April 2010, And-Kensaku was released. Development had lasted for 3 years, far longer than any of the developers had expected, but they had ended up with a final product that they were really proud of. And that's the story of the time Nintendo made a game about Googling. I hope you found that interesting, and you can subscribe for more videos like these. Plus, if you know someone who would find this video interesting, sharing it with them is a huge help for me. Right, I'll see you next week. Bye!